We are living in an era of profound revelation, not solely because of artificial intelligence, but because of what AI is revealing about us, our belief systems, our narratives, the constructs we've built our world upon. It's reflecting back the way we process truth, the biases embedded in our institutions, and the structures that dictate power. In real time, AI is showing us how much of our reality is built on stories and how easily those stories can be rewritten. The Intersect is a new show about how technology, media, and culture are not separate, but inseparable. Together they form what I think of as our intersectional reality. It's a space where information, identity, and power collide. We're already living in an AI-driven world, but as humans, we are utterly unprepared for it. And for this first episode, I had to start with the story I lived firsthand. The story of how AI replaced not just jobs, but the function of truth itself. AI killed the news editor. This is not a metaphor, it happened, and it's where this journey begins. My guest today is Katie Drummond, the global editorial director of Wired. She was formerly SVP in Global News and Entertainment at Vice Media, where she led the company's global expansion and, in time, its contraction. Her previous roles include deputy editor of Bloomberg Digital, editor-in-chief of Gizmodo, The Verge, among other impressive digital editorial titles. She is a force in this industry, a colleague I admire deeply and also consider a friend. We've worked closely together, often under extraordinary pressure, through layoffs, pivots, broken models, and deep institutional volatility. There's a bond that forms when you navigate that kind of entropy together, and you'll hear it. What struck me most in this conversation is just how quickly we aligned on something I've been wrestling with. That AI didn't just replace the human editor. It made the idea of editorial judgment obsolete. It replaced the people whose job it was to decide what mattered, what was real, with algorithms designed to exploit our vulnerabilities. And the surreal part, it didn't just happen in some imagined future. It happened a decade ago. If this conversation resonates, if you're asking these same questions, please subscribe now wherever you're listening. And if you have thoughts, feedback, ideas, I want them. Send me an email, ideas@theintersectshow.com. Let's talk to Katie. Katie Drummond.
Hi.
Welcome to The Intersect.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to see you.
I'm glad to see you too. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. It's been too long.
It has.
How's your mental physical? You're about to go on vacay.
My mental physical. Mentally, physically, like existentially very tired. You know what I mean? But like at a surface level, good. Leaned back, relaxed, finishing up the work week, and then going on vacation for a week with my daughter.
Do you want to tell me where?
Somewhere in Europe. Okay. Yeah. Her first big international trip. So she's very excited.
This is very exciting. Thank you for doing this before you jet set.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. I'm excited to talk. My favorite subject, my favorite thing to talk about is journalism. Unfortunately for me.
Yeah, big topic.
Yeah.
Big topic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you'll humor me.
I will.
Thank you. I have very much been looking forward to this conversation. As soon as I had this idea for the Intersect, or what I wanted to talk about in episode 1, I knew I wanted to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I really did. And I also, just for the record, to be clear, before I heard your name uttered out of Kara Swisher's mouth on like Pivot, which you were doing CNN hits before that and all, but when I heard it, I was just like, it's like that, my colleague in arms. I was very proud.
Thank you. I mean, that was a big deal for me too, that one.
Yeah. That was a scary one. We'll get into, yeah, you were awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
You were awesome. But I was like, damn it. I mean, this is great, but also like, I need Katie. And so anyway, I just thank you. Thank you. Okay. So humor me while I set up the thesis of our convo, which is,
okay,
quite frankly, kicking off the Intersect properly. This will be the first episode and really the whole premise of how I got here. You and I sat together in the trenches of some of journalism's most significant transformation over the last decade. We witnessed firsthand this explosive growth of these new formats and new platforms and audiences. And it was in a lot of ways very exciting. It was an opportunity, but the revenue continued to just erode. The business model contracted. We've seen newsrooms gutted. We gutted them. I've personally had to let go of like thousands of journalists, and I never imagined that going into a career 25 years ago why would I have walked in the door? I mean, but it was chaos and entropy. And I that word chaos is very specific for me because I often remember getting on these Zooms with you and you would be like, it's so chaotic. And I would be like, it's so chaotic. And it was
was
just,
a lot of
and I
chaos.
mean, it's chaotic right now, but it was a very specific, contraction over the last decade, quite frankly, of these newsrooms. And so in a quieter time for me this summer, actually right after I visited you at Conde, and
Yeah.
you'd been at Conde maybe or Wired, I should say, 9-ish months or something. And I was freshly into the CEO role at Refinery, having that spun out of Vice Media Group. But it was quieter for me, and I had some time to reflect. And I was just going to start this book in earnest. And I had, this ultimately became the podcast, the Intersect. Here's my thought. It's been here. AI has been here. In fact, more than a decade ago, AI's killed the news editor.
Right.
It actually already happened. And as an industry, just this sort of aha moment for me, we just haven't properly reported it because we couldn't, because we were inside of this simulation almost. We couldn't see it. And I had this sort of moment where, quite frankly, all these people that I'd fired in this, the God, not just me, the got fired, this, in these legacy institutions, in the ailing legacy institutions, in these new journalism orgs that had new ideas. I joined a lot of them. I led a lot of them, and they didn't work out.
Right.
But there was a lot of success and growth and audiences and building these things. But I think in this realization for me of, wait, AI actually already killed the news editor. It wasn't just my fault. It wasn't our fault. It was much bigger. It was, journalism and the infosphere had already succumbed to AI. So, and I'm going to wrap this up. You need to talk, but like the algorithms so that we ourselves like unwittingly programmed, quite frankly, rudimentary AIs, these algorithms that optimize for engagement, they already took control of information flows and what got prioritized and didn't even show up. And you could even argue that, Trump is president for the second time because Truth Social exists. And these are
Right.
channels that the mainstream media still largely is not, I don't want to say ignoring, but it's not part of the mainstream conversation or the reach. And, so I would say we're not just in post-truth, we're just post-institutionalized media. White House press corps is being completely rewritten. And I would say there that rightly so, because the inputs and outputs are different. They're just different now. So the idea, this conversation that AI has already replaced the news editor is unleashed this new fragmented media landscape full of independent creators, podcast voices that mainstream media largely ignore. That's really the core story that we're just beginning to unpack. But I feel like we've left out the idea that actually AI is at the very root of all of this. It's actually how we got here in the last, 10, 20 years. And so, okay, you have always been a fearless voice, always. I just respect
I do my best.
You're doing it. And so I would love you to be fearless in this conversation with me. But one, react to that and let's just jump into it. Yeah, go for it.
No, as you were talking, I think that's all true and right. And I think one of the observations I have made in the last few years is that there is this, when people hear the term AI now in the year 2025, they think ChatGPT, LLMs, OpenAI, or, they think about DeepSeek and all the coverage they've seen about sort of China and the US AI arms race and what that means. And they're actually thinking about this specific subset of AI technology, generative AI,
Yeah,
right? And there
yes.
has been all of this hand-wringing and all of these, very fairly concerns about copyright and sort of the impact that generative AI will have on media. But I think that there is all of this sort of hand-wringing and obsessiveness about generative AI. But to your point, there's this sort of like bigger, much longer term story that I think everybody or a lot of people in media miss just because of a lack of sort of literacy around what AI is, where it shows up, how it shows up. I mean, myself among those people. I have worked sort of adjacent to or in technology journalism for a very long time, but I am not sort of like an in the weeds AI expert, right? And given the fact that I am sort of tech adjacent, but many journalists are not, it's like you're not thinking about AI when you're thinking about programming the Facebook news feed for the publication that you oversee. And so I think there were these years and years and years where we talked about social media, we talked about big tech, we talked about how tech was sort of harnessing and taking over the journalism industry, but we weren't having a conversation about AI.
Yep.
When in fact we probably should have been and would have been smart to have had those conversations 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, because now, to your point again, like the damage has been done. Like we're well past the point of no return on what all of those algorithms did to sort of like the digital information landscape and the brands that would survive and that wouldn't survive. And I think when I think about my own career now, I feel very lucky, like very, very, very lucky to work at one of the very, very, very few publications that still exists that has enough equity in its name and its reputation that we did not succumb to all of those algorithmic forces. I mean, it was wired damaged and like sort of like dented financially as a brand in the last 10, 15, of course, like as any other brand was, but we have enough of an audience that knows us, that still comes to our homepage, right? That seeks out information from Wired, that we didn't sort of suffer the same fate as so many other publishers and publications over the last 10 years, where it's just like, if you were overly reliant on these platforms that you did not own or control, you were at the whims of their algorithms. And we all saw how that turned out for so many publications. And the sort of like sick irony of it, and then I'll stop talking and you can respond to all of this, the sick irony of it, and I think about this in the context of Vice all the time, which is that I think we did, especially in my sort of last couple years there, we did something very specific, which is we said, we're going to focus less on owned and operated audience. We're going to focus less on audience coming directly to our website, because the big audiences out there are on places like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. They're on all of these other platforms. We need to go find those audiences and bring them the best version of our journalism we possibly can. That sounds rational and reasonable. And we built these huge audiences. Like when I think about the success that we had at Vice on TikTok, we built this massive audience. We were way ahead of the curve. We were pioneering how you tell stories on TikTok. Did we make money from that? No. Were we at the whims of that algorithm to surface our journalism or not? Absolutely. And it was this sort of, it was, I mean, one of many errors, because human error obviously is a big factor here. But I just think about sort of how so many publications, Vice included, gave so much away. And it was ultimately sort of given to these companies and these algorithms that couldn't give less of a shit, really, who you are, what your brand is, what it represents to people, what it means to the audience. And if you're a publisher, you're thinking, oh, this is really interesting. This is really exciting. We're reaching these massive audiences. We're at the top of the funnel, but never with enough runway to pull those audiences through that funnel and get them to like start paying for journalism that you own and that you can control. And that was these sort of like fatal errors. And I think a lot of the hand-wringing that I see now about generative AI and the caution and the care that's being taken by not every publisher, but a lot, I think a lot of that is informed by what has happened over the last 10 or 20 years, right? It's like, fool me once, but let's not do this again. But I still don't think there's a recognition that like there was artificial intelligence infused into all of this entire time.
Yes. Okay. I feel so seen. I knew this conversation would just, I click. I could say a million things. I'm going to pause for the cause, and I'm going to rewind back on how you even got into journalism, because
Sure.
You have a philosophy degree.
I do.
We're having a philosophical conversation. Rewind me back, because you've been tech adjacent. You've been in tech journalism for a long time. You've also been in business journalism.
Yeah.
How did you, from philosophy to journalism, talk a little bit about that? And then how, if you think that serves you in some way, I think that does in this moment. Yeah.
I mean, I knew that I wanted to be a journalist or really like a writer or a lawyer. My mom was a writer. My dad was a lawyer. So you can guess where that came from. Knowing in my heart of hearts that writing was really what I loved to do. And my mom died when I was 18. And it's a very uncomfortable thing for me still. It's been 20 years, over 20 years. But that sort of for me was like, okay, well, life is short. I'm going to be a writer. So philosophy for me was just like, I need to pick a major. My dad says it can't be creative writing, which he did. I tried to enroll in like a poetry writing Bachelor of Fine Arts program. And my dad, like, who is very generous in how he handles his kids, like very permissive, wonderful dad. That was a hard line for him of just like, you're not getting a degree in creative writing. Like, this is not happening.
Journalism's going to pay the bills.
Right, journalism. But I think for him, in his mind, probably like philosophy could be a conduit to law school. It could take you all sorts of different places. So I did a philosophy degree. I ended up loving it despite the sort of like on a surface level, like very useless degree ultimately. Like you're in that liberal arts, like is it sociology, philosophy, psychology, like one of those majors where it's sort of like mushy.
My daughter's graduated in philosophy.
Oh, well, she'll be fine.
She's about to hike the Appalachia Trail.
Better than fine.
Yeah.
That sounds ideal given the
Going off
circumstances
grid.
right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Go on.
But I think that, and I would joke all the time about like what a useless degree it was. And I enjoyed my time getting a philosophy degree. But I think what I didn't realize until I actually became a working journalist, I would get feedback from my editor at my first job that was like, you're really good at taking complicated subjects and distilling them. You're really good at synthesis and analysis, at distilling complicated information, making it easy for people to understand, and then explaining to them the broader context and like why it matters. And that for me was like, oh, right. Like I just spent 4 years learning how to do that. And it ultimately has served me very well in ways that I didn't recognize or that like weren't really obvious to me, that a degree in philosophy teaches you to think critically about big questions, to take very sort of like dense material and put it into sort of like an essay format, make an argument out of it, explain your argument, like synthesize and analyze information and apply critical thought and critical reasoning to it. And so that turns out useful skill set. And I do think that has really served me very well as a reporter, as an editor, and then like certainly in management when you're thinking about strategy or you're thinking about sort of thorny problems. I think because of that degree and the time that I spent doing that, I am able to do that in an effective way, in a mostly effective way. I mean, I'm not always right, but I'm able to come up with sort of like a thesis and argue that out, even if it's just like in my own head about the right path forward, if that makes sense.
It makes a ton of sense. I mean, I worked with you very closely for many years,
Yes,
and
you did.
I witnessed that very
Thank
like,
you.
oh, this is a chaotic time. I'm going to get as much information as I can, and I'm going to apply rational thought, and I'm going to come. Here's a plan, and and then explain that plan to people, and
Yeah.
But the critical thinking piece, just to go back that in my daughter's undergrad or in philosophy, there was a time, and like your dad, I love that he was just like, no, there's math, there's math involved here, and that's with logic, and it's not just you're not just going to be a creative writer. But I think there was a time, I don't know, she's been out of school 4 or 5 years now, and where maybe 10, 15 years, that's like my daughter would get a degree in philosophy. Like sure, that's fine. I mean, I'm also very like, we'll support you guys. But I think the idea, and she's always been a very critical thinker, I think that's the most important skill right now in a lot of ways. Yeah. I mean, I'm just jumping way ahead here, but that's this insight. I didn't realize you had a degree in philosophy, and then when I read that, and I just thought, well, that makes so much sense. And also, I think everybody should. I mean, it's maybe not pay our bills right now, but my point is just that to be able to think critically about what's happening. The intent of this podcast itself, because we're not doing that. We've been unable to do that. I think we haven't had enough information about what's actually really going on. Anyway,
and things like it. There is so much accelerant on everything, right? Like when you think about the AI industry, like all the generative AI stuff, even just that alone, it's like we don't have the keys to that in so many ways, right? It's like that is just big tech doing what it's doing, letting us know what it's doing if it feels like it, and we're just sort of sitting as like passive observers. And so I think to be able to, at least if you're passively observing your world being taken over by a technology, you should at least be able to apply critical thought to what the implications of that might be. That's the least we could hope for.
Well, I think a critical thinker leading a publication like Wired in this moment is exactly what we need. I mean, I'm biased, but you are in the right job. Okay, I'm gonna bring us to our favorite subject. I'm just journalist as brand, reporter as brand. People follow
Yes.
people.
Yes.
We've all been saying this for quite some time. But exploring this more indie model, dare I even say creator, journalist as creator model, which it's not that new. It's like we've had anchors on the star system within journalism has, but it
Right.
just, but this idea, and I'm using this word, but that journalist as creator, journalist as brand, you can be like a full stack executive of yourself with all the tooling. We don't need
Mhm.
the same sort of arsenal, or as we have all of these robots that we can put to work for us, and journalist as brand can now lift off because you don't need these huge costs like you did before. You're leading a smaller institution with star reporters, right? Like,
Mhm.
just talk to me about that in a world of creators popping up, how you think about your own, your own staff at Wired.
Yeah.
If you think this model of more independent, yeah, curious.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because one of the things that I did when I got to Wired was that I made an observation that the brand felt very anonymous. It was like it's Wired, but like who are the people? Like who are the faces and the voices of this brand? And so we have been really trying to build that out in the last year and a half of just like getting faces on TikTok, getting talent-led newsletters, having our journalists host YouTube series, like all these different levers that we can pull to create like a sense of direct connection between the audience and the people who actually make this thing every day,
Yep.
right? I think that that's like a very important sort of guiding principle for digital publishing now is just that people don't connect to like NBC News or Wired. They connect to that really smart editor who's always on TikTok talking about security news. I love him. Oh yeah, it's the Wired account. Like that's what it is, right? It's like Wired is often I think secondary to the names and the faces and the voices of our journalists. And I
It
think
like paints a background. It's a platform for them, right?
it's
It's
a
a
platform for
platform.
them.
Yeah.
And so I think there's sort of like that from an institutional point of view, like you can't ignore that that is where audiences are moving, right? So you have to sort of adapt your own institution to that reality. And then I think you have this, like, there's this sort of secondary consideration, which is, well, what about the idea of journalists or creators operating without the institution at all? And I think that for me, I mean, I would say that like my primary reaction to that is if you can swing it, if you can make a living, like God bless, good for you. That sounds amazing. I think it takes a certain type of person, a certain type of personality, a certain level of risk tolerance, although certainly having a full-time job is not like the safety net that it once was in this industry, but it's a certain personality who I think can really make that work. Um the concern I have about it if I were to have any is these big journalistic institutions are able to do what they do for good reasons. They have legal
Yep.
teams, they have copy editors, fact checkers, they have all of this, they have insurance in case they get sued over a story and they lose in court, right? That keep them afloat. Like all of this infrastructure in these big institutions exists in part, or at least like in my world, when I think about that infrastructure, I'm like, that exists so that we can do the most high touch, high risk, high impact journalism we possibly can. And all of this infrastructure is here to support us in doing that. You can't replace that with AI. Like that is just like what it takes to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
So I do worry as more independent journalists go off on their own, not that they won't be careful. I think that like journalists who go off and run a newsletter or do something independent are rigorous and they're just as good as someone who works at an institution. There's a more concise way of putting it. But I do worry that we will lose some of that high risk, high impact reporting that you just like need a certain level of infrastructure to be able to execute on. And so I do think that there is an importance in preserving these institutions, evolving them all yada yada yada, but because I worry about the overall well of journalism that will exist or won't exist depending on how the next few years play out in terms of like independent creators, if that makes sense.
It does, and I want to dig into it for a second because I'm having my own meta sort of moment about this where, I'm thinking about, I mean, this is our first episode, right? Hi,
Yes, here
I'm
we
doing
are.
first, and we have our little, I'm looking at, Chad over there, Haley, where Caitlin on camera, this crew, teeny tiny crew, we're all trying to figure out how to make this work. We're bootstrapping this operation right now. I've got this great distribution partner, Dear Media, which incredible, just an opportunity to be able to run, but self-funding this thing. And when I think about, sure, great, we can, but my biggest concerns, and I'm like, I don't really have someone to legal this, and sure, I can hire somebody, but it's not, and LegalZoom isn't going to cut it. And it's okay. The exploration I'm doing, right, we're all right. But like, if, to your point, if we move into that, maybe this is a problem to be solved. Maybe there's a business here for somebody to set up these kinds of infrastructures for these independent creators and journalists, and maybe the Substacks of the world are already doing that. But in terms of taking risks, because we're in an environment where it's hard to see how that risk, because when you have on your big girl pants and you're you've got the Washington Post and you've got all these institutions behind you with all these really fantastic lawyers and smart editors and journalists, you are emboldened.
Yes.
But in a world where there's a press corps that are being credentialed against, like, if you may or may not have pronouns in your name, like, then there's a chilling effect. And so this is a deep, 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 deep chilled effect, and that independent journos maybe cannot go after some of these, like, as doggedly and feel protected in the same way. I think that's really, and I think that's something to watch in some way, because I don't think it's going to be a very obvious. It'll be like, oh wait, now for the last decade we haven't had the kinds of stories that have broken open X and Y because of
right. And this is making me think of a conversation I was having with a former colleague earlier this week. And he was so we worked at Gawker Media together, which was like the heyday of
RIP.
You like publish a scoop on Gawker, and you like watch it light up the internet. And it was like smoking 20 cigarettes at the same time, which for me is a very good thing. I don't smoke anymore, but if I could,
it's a good time. That's a good time.
It's like that feeling. If you were a person, like, it's like it would go everywhere. And we were talking about how in this era, it is so, so, so incredibly rare to have the kind of story, given how fragmented audiences are now, to have the kind of story from the kind of outlet that can like break through across the board. I mean, I think the Atlantic story about Signal is like the very rare example of a story that just was universally read, right? It didn't matter whether you followed, Blue Sky or X or Truth Social, like what kind of little bubble you lived in, you saw that story. And I think with independent journalists and creators and more of these smaller shops and fewer of these bigger institutions, the trend that would follow from that is sort of, we are leaning into the fragmentation and leaning into sort of individual journalist who writes for their newsletter audience of 5,000 people. And that's sort of that bubble. And then these bubbles like overlap on top of each other. So there's like a bit of a multifaceted Venn diagram of little audience bubbles, but it's just like little creator, little audience, or sometimes like big creator with a big audience, but it's not the same as 10 years ago. You're an outlet, you publish on the internet, you publish a big story, and it just goes absolutely everywhere. Like, it's a completely different picture now. And we were sort of lamenting that, like, over a drink, that is, again, and we're coming back to algorithms and AI at the same time as we're talking about sort of individual journalists and creators. I mean, it's sort of like the collision of those two forces is where we are now, and is sort of presenting, I think, a lot of challenges for news and information and sort of literacy about what's happening in the world to actually make its way to the entire world, because there is no sort of entire world on the internet, so to speak. It was never the entire world, but that you can reach anymore.
That's exactly right. I mean, I often say, network of niches, and it's one could argue that this monolithic media culture that we thought we had was just our own, the one big bubble we were all in, or a couple of bubbles, and now they're just
one in New York, one in LA.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, I agree. Your point is and so it's great we have unleashed this world of, investigative and creators and journalists and makers and doing all, but it's distribution is the real, that's the question. That's the existential. We've seen technology and media, politics and culture increasingly collide. It's really a lot of what we were just talking about. Tech CEOs influencing policy, political movements, organizing on social, cultural trends driven by tech platforms. Okay. This blurring of lines, like what brought you to this changing approach to what counts as a technology story? You hired a bunch of political journalists when you walked in the door. I mean, it's all, I mean, in my mind, it's you have to do all of this together right now. You can't think about them.
Yeah. I mean, I think the dumbest possible answer to that, or like the broadest possible answer, would be to say like, well, like actually everything is a technology story. That's not particularly helpful when you're running Wired, right? So we have verticals, we have sections, right? We have desks that define what we cover. We cover security, so we specialize in, hacking and cyber exploits and vulnerabilities, and so we have sort of that expertise. We cover science. We cover culture through the lens of like digital communication and digital communities. We cover obviously the tech industry and business. We cover consumer technology products. So I sort of try to narrow our focus around like, well, sure, everything is a technology company. That doesn't mean we cover everything. We cover these things from a sort of forward-looking, technologically infused point of view. And where the politics thing comes in is that to me was, okay, we have all of these, we have these verticals. This is what we cover. What are we not covering right now that we could be, like, we could be covering like personal finance, travel, like there are all of these different categories that we could say we're going to get into. But when I started the job, this was actually my second day, obviously a very nerve-wracking job to start. Your boss is Anna Wintour. You work at Condé Nast. I had been working at Vice for 5 years. I dressed similarly to this because it's a Friday, but like not this well.
No, I'm just
it was very bad.
You look so chic now, but it's still you. We were talking before.
We were talking. Yes. So you're being Condé-fied. Yeah. But I woke up, I think at like 4 a.m. on my second day, and had all of these things like mulling around in my brain, like 2024. I started in September 2023, so I was like, next year there's going to be a U.S. presidential election. And there will be a record number of elections around the world in 2024. Oh my God, like we're not ready for that at all. And I sent my boss an email saying, I need to hire a politics team.
In the morning, very early in the morning?
Oh, at like 4 a.m. Yeah. Here's why. I wrote like a little manifesto. Here's what I need. I want to hire 3 people. I want to hire an editor. And of course she wrote back right away because that's who my boss is. She's amazing. And we did it, and it was, I'll be honest with you, like, I mean, Wired has covered politics before, never in such a concerted way. It was something that for some of the staff and for a lot of our audience, there was resistance, and there was like, why are we doing this? Like it's Wired, like we're a tech magazine. Like, why are we covering politics? And I will say, I mean, everyone who works at Wired is very, very smart. These weren't stupid questions. I think they were very valid questions. And I think that the rationale for us covering politics became more and more obvious as that election cycle went on. You had like the Joe Biden robocall in New Hampshire, right, that used AI to mimic Joe Biden's voice and sow chaos, right before, I think it was the primaries. So you started to see this like, okay, and then over the summer, Trump gets shot in the ear. Elon Musk endorses him on X. And all of a sudden, you have a very different story on your hands where everyone was like, oh. And even I was like, well, I didn't see this coming. Yeah. But like, yeah, this is why we cover politics now, right? Yes. Whether it's hacking, it's AI, it's, tech executives and sort of like the tech elite infiltrating DC and infiltrating politics. Like there are all of these different ways in which you can't separate what's happening in technology, whether it's in the tech industry or the development of new technology or the use of technology by malevolent actors. Like all of these different facets of technology are a politics story on a daily basis. And then, of course, in the last several months, we've just watched the richest person in the world and probably, among the most prominent technology leaders, not just of the moment, but like of our lifetimes, right, wield his power through every federal agency in the United States government. Like, yeah. It's a tech story. Like, that's what it is. And I'm very, very glad, I will say, that I sent that email in September 2023 and hired that team, because the thought of not being in a position to cover what is happening, I feel physically sick thinking about where we would be as a publication if we were not ready for this moment. But it's all to your it's this. And I think that I had a theory, I had a suspicion, and it proved to be true. I'm not always right. I was right on that one.
Yeah, you were right on that one.
I was right.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean, you're fearless. I mean, damn, I will just props. And we're all very glad that you sent that email to Anna Wintour. And we also, look in the camera, thank you, Anna, for saying yes. I mean,
She responded positively.
But you guys were set up. I mean, day one, it was go time. Talk to me a little bit about what it's. I mean, talk to me about the Doge story and how you got the team around that, and what did it look like and feel like in your office? Yeah.
No, I mean, this is with so much, like 99% credit to the politics team and the leadership, who are alumni of Vice, Tim Marchman, Leah Feiger, who are at Wired now working with me, Brian Barrett, our executive editor. Like, we have a fantastic team of really smart people who, when Project 2025 sort of surfaced, they were reading that like very early days, and sort of putting the pieces together of, okay, this is like a playbook, basically. If he wins, if Donald Trump wins, like, what does this mean? Where should we be pointing reporters now to be ready to cover what is being outlined in what is essentially like a roadmap for how to run the country through the lens of whatever exactly that ideology is. And so I think sort of being very early to that, and to sort of realizing that, like, this is a playbook, this is a blueprint. We need to take this very literally and very seriously and actually start getting ready to cover what is being outlined here in case he wins. And then over the summer, when Trump got shot and Elon jumped in, it was immediately like, okay, it's go time. Like, he's going to win. Elon Musk will be next to him. Project 2025 will be in both their backpacks. And so, like, what does that mean for where we need to be focusing? So we were having those conversations last summer, and there were moments of hope with Kamala, like, but we were all pretty much like, nah, he's going to win.
Yeah.
He's going to win. And so I remember like talking to the entire newsroom after Trump got shot and Musk endorsed him, and saying to everyone, like, it is highly likely that Donald Trump will be president again come November. Every single person here needs to start getting ready now. And they did. And they did. And Tim and Leah were so fundamental in sort of like really thinking about, it's hard to like take a document like that and be like, okay, but then what can we extrapolate from that? Like, where should we start looking? And so then as soon as Doge was announced, which was, I think, right after Trump won the election, it was like, okay, we need to jump on this immediately. And I think that for journalists who go in the front door in DC, right, who cover politics in like a very conventional, straightforward way, they maybe were not so focused on the Department of Government efficiency that had been announced. Yeah. Whereas for us, it's like, this is the Elon Musk thing. Like, this is where we need to be focused. And so we were focused on it just very early on, and asking very basic questions like, who actually works for this? How much money do they have? What are they trying to do? And so just like answering that first question of like, who works for Doge? Like, that was the first big story we had that was like, here's who works for Doge. Yeah. And it was explosive because it turns out they were 19, 20, 21 years old, former interns at Elon Musk's companies, no government experience. And like that really, like, the floodgate of tips, right? And people working inside of these agencies who were extremely alarmed to have a 19-year-old nicknamed Big Balls, like, asking for a one-on-one with them. And so then we had sort of like this first mover advantage where we were first. And so we heard from everyone. And then we have just like incredibly skilled journalists and editors who really developed relationships with those sources, and I think take their confidentiality and their safety very seriously, and just like handled the stories with great care. That's when I talk about this infrastructure, right? We have an amazing fact-checking team on staff. We have amazing lawyers who are reading every single story that we publish to make sure it is bulletproof to publish. And like, that's when I think about, sort of, to get back a little bit to that creator conversation and the AI of it all and all of this stuff, it's like, there is no world in which we could have done all of these stories. We're publishing like 1 or 2 stories a day, 5 days a week on this stuff. no world in which we could have done that without the infrastructure of Condé Nast. Like, it just wouldn't have been possible. But for the newsroom, I mean, man, it's been really busy.
It's been really busy.
It's been
yeah,
really
and
busy.
we're all very grateful for you. And your team, truly. I mean, just an upshot. You guys were prepared. You were thinking very critically, very early
Mhm.
on. You're very smart editors. We're looking at Project 2025 and trying to, but in looking in that direction, I mean, that's where the nexus is. That's where the
Right.
nexus. You have the right team looking at this with all of the expertise. And there's without the infrastructure of a Conde, there would be no world in which you could publish the volume that you're publishing. And right now,
No, there's no way.
because of this existential distribution, I think the volume and the fact that you're like hitting it over and over, and that you're getting impact just by way of that. And that volume is hard to do. I mean, you can yap all day, but you're doing shoe leather in the digital
Yeah.
world reporting
Yeah.
of this kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and like iterative reporting. And it's been
Yeah.
interesting to see how it has played out on different platforms, because again, I mean, it's like everything is so fragmented that it's like when we publish stories, like we have the homepage audience, we have the newsletter audience, but then beyond that, it's like we have the X audience, we have the Facebook audience, we have the Blue Sky audience, we have the TikTok audience, we have the Instagram audience, we have the YouTube audience, we have the Reddit audience, we have many audiences. And so trying to get that journalism in front of all of those different bubbles at the same time, and it's just been interesting to see like which platforms have been more receptive and which haven't. Like Facebook, when they killed their fact checking program and they actually just sort of said like floodgates are open, all of a sudden our politics journalism, after having like 0 readers referred by Facebook for years, all of a sudden, okay, we're taking off on Facebook again.
Interesting.
It's same vicious cycle.
Yes.
Blue Sky, which I think leans, I don't think, I know, like leans more progressive, more to the
all
left.
the journalists got on Blue Sky.
Wired is beloved on Blue Sky, right? We have this very loyal, receptive audience there. Not so much on X, right? Instagram, we had an audience that for my first year and 3 months was like, why is Wired covering politics, right? Because that Instagram account had been built up in an earlier era, and that has now sort of come around. So it's just, anyway, it's been interesting to see. It's not just like you click a button and those stories just go crazy because they're crazy stories. It's like, how do we get this on 10 different platforms in addition to the platforms that we own and operate to make sure that everyone sees them?
And in this case, I mean, and those are the jobs we've been doing for a long time, obviously. But in this case, how can we actually have impact? How
Right.
does this, journalism? We have you for 8-ish more minutes, Katie.
Oh,
And so
no,
I know,
that went
no,
by
I know,
so
I know,
fast.
I know.
Okay.
I could talk to you all day, but I want to get a little bit to AI in your own newsroom.
Yeah.
Meta, but using these tools. I do not fear the Reaper. I say, use the robots.
Yeah.
We've been using the robot. Well, they've been using us. I don't know, but both. But what do you guys? Because these reporters that you have. I mean, when I first walked into a newsroom, I remember 25 years ago. It's like, these are the car people. And I'm like, the car people? And I was like, the car people. And they sat in a special, different room. It was the library in the newsroom. The computer-assisted reporting. The car people.
Whoa.
No, I know. And they were using,
that's
they were
wild.
using Excel spreadsheets, writing, I don't know, making their own SQL database or something. This is pre.
Computer assisted reporting. Wow.
What a concept.
Yeah, that's wild.
What a concept. I mean, we're all doing it now. How are your reporters, getting into this stuff? What are you guys doing?
Honestly, and maybe it's interesting to have this coming from the person running Wired and Wired the publication, like very cautiously. So I think there's sort of the IP of it all, right? Which is like a separate conversation. It's much more a Condé Nast conversation. And that is around protecting our IP and the IP of all of Condé Nast brands in the face of companies essentially scraping it without permission, without compensation. So that's sort of like one piece of it, where we are very wary, we are very much on guard. We very much believe that the journalism and the storytelling that we do ought to be compensated, that we need to sort of, it comes back to sort of not learning the right lessons from the social media algorithm era, right? Let's not make that mistake again. Let's do everything we can to safeguard our journalism, to be compensated for our journalism, to have a sustainable media operation. So there's that piece of it. And then there's sort of like, okay, we're very like on guard around AI in that context. And then it's about how are we on the back end, like when we're actually in the guts of the thing, doing the journalism, doing the work, how are we actually going to use this technology? Because it is useful. I think that's important as much as it is also like just like robbery. There is a real utility to a lot of the tools that you can build. And that's actually something that we are just now exploring. So like we're talking about things like headline generation and headline guidance, headline best
Ah,
practices, SEO best practices, different approaches to A/B testing. We use AI, or journalists use AI when they're crafting like freedom of information requests, like anything really manual, or they are sort of parsing complicated data sets, like stuff that is really manual, really time intensive, really labor intensive. AI can be a shortcut to that, right? As long as you're checking your work on the other side of it. Um, but I would say for us, it has, and this is also like sort of a Condé Nast thing. And I think, again, going back to just learning the lessons from the first go around, this technology is really interesting. It's potentially really exciting. It's potentially transformational. Let's be very thoughtful and cautious about how we use it and where we use it, knowing that the value of what we do is human led and always will be. And so it's really more about how do we facilitate the best possible journalism from the best possible journalists without ever even thinking about replacing those journalists or those photographers or those designers, like all of that stuff. Like this is genuinely like a human project. Like the act of journalism is like, it's not something that AI can do, but it can help you do your job better. So I think we're still trying to figure out what that means. And I think, the idea too of like AI generated work, whether it's written or photo, or like that is something that um we don't do. Like we actually just have a blanket ban on it, which I don't think is a forever thing, but I think in this moment in time that we're in, I think it's like a right now thing. And something that we would do with great care and great transparency. But like we have this back page in the print magazine. This is a good example. It's called 6 Word Sci-Fi. And audiences look at like a crazy illustration, and then they submit like a 6 word sci-fi story to match the illustration. We pick a winner.
I know it. It's really, I
Oh,
love
thank
it.
you. But we had this idea of like, it would be really fun to use AI to generate that illustration, or to generate like a short video version of the 6 word sci-fi, or to take all of the 6 word sci-fi submissions and create images or videos of those. Like there's something very cool we could do there with AI generated video and AI generated imagery that we're not doing right now, but it's like worth talking about because it's sci-fi, it's science fiction. Like
Yes.
it's supposed to be made up. And so could we use AI in like a fun, interesting, creative way in that context, or use an AI artist, at least an artist who works with AI?
I like that. I
Thank
like
you.
that. I like that. Okay, I have one last question. And this is a fun one. Last one, fun one. Okay. And yeah, anything. Tell me about a piece of content
Okay.
you've consumed in the last week-ish that's
Okay.
really stuck with you. And
Okay.
this could be long form narrative. This could be an X. This could be an Instagram, this TikTok, anything. But
Okay.
AGI could have made it. But tell me why it stuck with you, why it resonated.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay. This is going to be unexpected.
Fantastic.
But and I'm very open about the fact that I am a very heavy TikTok user.
Yeah.
So I spend a lot of time just doing this.
Yeah.
It's sort of for me, all day you go, go, go. And then TikTok for me is like, I just need an hour to like be so dumb. I need to just be so dumb for an hour. So that's TikTok for me. And I was thinking about this on the ride over because last night I went down what you open TikTok, you never quite know what you're going to get. The algorithm is going to give you a mix of stuff you've already seen that you've spent time with, and then they're going to surface new things for you and see if you're interested in them. And then if you're interested, you're going to go all the way down that rabbit hole. So I went down the most amazing rabbit hole last night. Sorry, this is like not helpful for anyone, but there's this account called, I believe it's called Amalfi Private Jets.
Okay.
And it's these videos of this young CEO who runs a private charter plane company, like a luxury travel company, where he gets phone calls from this girl. Sounds like maybe a college age girl. I think her name is Mackenzie. And McKenna or Mackenzie is calling him to basically like book a private jet to Geneva, or like, my dad got mad at me because I crashed the Ferrari. I need to go to London now. And it's just him on the phone, on speakerphone with her, booking her private plane and kind of rolling his eyes at what a like rich little snot she is. And so you keep going down this rabbit hole of this private jet company, and all of a sudden I'm seeing his account and his post, the CEO. I'm seeing the rich, like, teenage girl's account. I'm seeing the CEO's girlfriend's account where she's posting about what it's like to date the CEO of Amalfi Private Jets. And I sort of like enter this like all-encompassing ecosystem of the Amalfi Private Jets charter company, which then I start wondering, and it's like taken over my TikTok feed. And then I'm like, is this real? Is this satire? Is this a fake company? Or is this just like the smartest, most tactical, savviest ad campaign I have ever seen, because they created this entire world around this company that is based on like luxury and voyeurism and sort of wanting what someone else has. You want the private jet, of course you do. Did they create is this just a marketing campaign that I have just like fallen victim to, which says a lot again about AI and algorithms and truth versus fiction and sort of what happens when we all exist in our own little information bubble. But I really have enjoyed the last 24 hours of my life getting to know the cast of characters, the cinematic universe of Amalfi Private Jets on TikTok. So that is what I have been spending my time with lately, Corey, in case you want to feel a little bit better than someone else for a minute.
No, my mind is blown. We could talk about this for an hour, but I think this is actually the perfect anecdote to end, because whether or not it's real, whether Amalfi Jets or it's marketing, I think that the point is that this world has been implanted in your mind as a reality.
And whoever created it I went on Google. I'm like Googling like Amalfi Private Jets. I'm like, is this a real company? Who is this guy? Like, the videos have like many, many, many views. I mean, whatever they have done with this has been tremendously successful. And I don't know if it's a real company. I don't know if it's a fake company. I don't know if McKenna or Mackenzie or whoever is a real person. But like, they created this like 360 reality, which there are many of those on the internet, and that's kind of part of the problem. Okay, well, the Intersect is on it. Thank you. This was look into that.
I'm on it. I'm
Okay.
on it. Thank you. This was amazing.
Thank you for having me.
You were a very smart person, and you shared an hour-ish with us, and I'm very grateful.
Oh, well, ditto. Thank you for having me.
The Intersect is distributed exclusively by our partner, Dear Media. Today's episode was produced by yours truly, Corey Kareen, with technical production led by Chad Perisman, and coordination by Haley Duffy. Caitlin Durkin, an executive producer on the show, oversaw communications. A sincere thank you to Paige Port of Dear Media, Mark Paskin, Leslie Silverman, Ike Zhang, Madeline Utter, and many others from the United Talent Agency for believing in the show from the jump. Thank you to Music for a While and the Alameda Hotel for the use of their beautiful studio space. And a special thank you to my grown daughters, Megan Malawson and Anna Kareen Hike, for always pushing my thinking. And for those wondering about Amalfi Jets, they are a real private jet company with prolific social media marketing. If you liked our show today, please subscribe right here, wherever you're listening or watching. We'll be back here next week at The Intersect.